Hello, I'm Reverend Kate from the Center for Spiritual Living in Carlsbad, California, and our topic today is pick and choose. Now, being picky is not always thought of highly. In fact, you might have made fun of picky people or picky eaters. Most of us were trained not to seem selfish, not to seem critical, and maybe even trained not to even express our honest preferences. How many times have you been asked something like this? What movie do you want to see? Or what restaurant would you like to go to? Or where should we go for a drive? And then you answered, oh, I don't care. You choose whatever you'd like. Or I'll just have whatever's easiest. Or don't go to any extra trouble. I'll just take what's handy. You know, politeness is good, but so is having a clue about what you actually like. In fact, if you are a person who never likes to express your preferences much, the next question I have for you is, do you even know what you like? Are you just being polite? Or are you actually sitting back and choosing not to choose? In the self-mastery class that I've been teaching on Zoom, we read a passage by John Bradshaw from his book, Creating Love, that I would like to share with you also. He wrote, the mystified or confused or false idea of ourselves is born out of our belief that we are only lovable when we are not being ourselves. This creates feelings that are frozen, that continue to express through all of our relationships until they have even been embraced by us and integrated into who we think we are. It also creates confusion, pain, addiction, and relationships that are not based in truth. Now, the main idea of this particular class session that the reading came from was simply that in order to have a good relationship with another person, you need to begin with yourself. Now, I know that if you are watching this talk, you are already aware that we live in a 100% spiritual universe. And I know that you already tend to behave with kindness to other people and probably to everything and everyone that you encounter in life. Give yourself a pat on the back. But my question is, what about the way you treat yourself? What is your relationship with yourself? Do you love, cherish, and honor yourself? Do you even know much about yourself? Or are you your very own greatest unsolved mystery? I'm saying it in jest, but it might be true. Who are you? A lot of people are not really quite sure. Now, you've heard the saying, know thyself, right? It's a saying that's been passed down through many centuries, through millennia. And I want to just talk a little bit about the history of the saying before we go on, because we all are influenced not just by our personal past, but also by our shared cultural past. So know thyself was actually one of two maxims or moral rules that were inscribed into the Temple of Apollo at Delphi, Greece, about 400 years before the birth of Christ. And at about the same time, the Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu is thought to have written this: knowing others is intelligence, knowing yourself is true wisdom. In fact, I even read that the advice to know thyself has actually been found inside the Egyptian pyramids. And the Greek philosopher Socrates is supposed to have said that the unexamined life is not worth living. And Aristotle also believed that knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom and the key to living a life of harmony and reason. Around the year 1100, there was a medieval philosopher monk, Peter Abelard, who wrote a book called Ethics, or Know Thyself. He put the two together, arguing that it's good intentions which lie at the basis of truly good actions. And he relied on the biblical expression in Matthew 6:22, which says, "If thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light." Now, this information particularly struck me because when we study and teach our spiritual healing techniques that we learn as religious science practitioners, this very same biblical passage is often used to explain how the spiritual practitioner must learn to view any situation from what we call the single eye, or a point of clarity, of getting to the bottom of what truly is, seeing things from the essence of what is. So it was interesting to me that this same passage was used, over 1,000 years ago by a monk, also encouraging people to look at life from a point of view of truth and ethics and good intentions. This biblical passage is actually from the Sermon on the Mount. And it comes right after Jesus taught his listeners to pray in the way that we now call the Lord's Prayer. Another Bible translation translates it this way, saying, "The eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is unclouded, your whole body will be full of light." Now you can go to BibleHub.com and you can find lots of different translations, but from a metaphysical point of view, I can tell you that most of the translations are indicating that our view of life depends upon the wholeness or the clearness of our thinking, because we see the world from the vantage point of our thinking about the world. Even later philosophers in the 1600s, Thomas Hobbes wrote that wisdom is acquired not by the reading of books, but by the reading of men, and advised people to understand themselves before they could understand others. Benjamin Franklin wrote in Poor Richard's Almanac, "There are 3 things extremely hard, 3 things: steal, a diamond, and to know oneself." But then came along Emerson, who peeled away the confusion about what it meant to know oneself. And while his writing style is often hard to follow, he wrote this in his poem, Know Thyself. He wrote, "Then take this fact unto thy soul: God dwells in thee. It is no metaphor, nor parable. It is unknown to thousands, and to thee, yet there is God. There is God. God dwells in thee. Emerson is saying, know thyself and you will know God. God dwells in you as you dwell in God. And this is what we believe. And then it's just a small step to move into following Shakespeare's advice, to thine own self be true. And that brings us right back to today, to everyday living and everyday thoughts and our everyday choices. To know oneself is a journey, and the farther we travel along on the path, the more we will begin to be aware of what actually is good, what actually is good for us, and the more we can focus on it, embrace it, and experience it. It's very important to know what you like, what you desire, and can suggest you might include health, supply or prosperity, happiness, loving relationships, satisfying work or other activities. But as good as my suggestions might be, they're general, generic. And your life is not meant to be generic. Your life is meant to be unique, creative, wonderful, and satisfying. I knew a minister long before I became a minister who always ended every talk, prayer, letter with the saying, something wonderful is happening now, or the best is yet to come. And I have to say at the time, I thought it was a little mushy. But now I see what he meant. He meant it when he said it, because we live in the now, right here in the now. And we live as self-aware beings in a spiritual substance that is actually the infinite divine spirit in manifestation in this very moment. Which means that not only is it true that something wonderful is happening now, it means that you and I are actually part of this something wonderful happening now. So the past may have influenced us, maybe 100%, maybe just partly. But no matter, we still live in the now, not in the past. We had a past experience. We're going to have a future experience, but in actuality, you might think of the past and the future as a little bit like dreams influencing us in the now. Now is where we live. And when we can examine the past with an unclouded eye, a single eye, a clear eye, and when we can think about what the future might bring with clarity, then our present moment is brought into much sharper focus. We bring the light of understanding and self-knowledge right into our daily decision-making. So what role should you let the past play in your now experience? Let's go back to that passage from John Bradshaw. Remember what he wrote was, the mystified or confused or false idea of ourself is born out of our belief that we are only lovable when we are not being ourselves. This creates feelings that are frozen, that continue to express through all of our relationships until they have even been embraced by us and integrated into who we think we are. It can also create confusion, pain, addiction, or relationships that are not based in truth. Now, this time, I want to emphasize the word frozen. The idea that we are only lovable when we are basically acting as if we were playing a role in order to please others creates feelings that are frozen. Think of an ice cube, frozen. Now think of water in a glass, fluid, not frozen, but fluid, adaptable, changeable, moldable, in circulation, flowing. We want our lives to be flowing. We need to get to know our feelings, get to know ourselves. Then, when you know yourself and you get your feelings into a state of controllability, you begin to master yourself and your feelings. Now, usually when someone says, control yourself, they're asking you to pipe down, stop expressing yourself, be quiet. But in reality, for a lot of us, control yourself actually needs to be looked at differently. Take it as advice to take hold of ourselves, take care of ourselves, and move ourselves along gently, positively, along in our own life journey in an active, kind, and self-respectful way. So let's go back to the idea of having frozen feelings for a moment, because, it's nice to talk about taking control or letting go, but it's not always so easy to do, because if you find that you really can't easily recognize or control your feelings, they may have a grip on your unconscious. Sometimes this happens if you might have had bad or traumatic experiences. Or, they could be like really powerful traumatic experiences. Or they could be just small but cumulative experiences. You might remember them or not. Sometimes these frozen feelings just come from things that you may have actually been taught that were very formative in your ideas about yourself. I read about a woman who had experienced extreme pain from what turned out to be a gallbladder infection for a whole year. And then, after a diagnosis and successful operation, she was actually pain-free, but she found out and discovered that she was still so afraid and anxious about the possibility of suffering any type of pain at all. She had an experience of a frozen type of fear that was affecting her emotions constantly, even though the actual cause of the fear was gone. It was in the past. Now, in her case, she was finally diagnosed with PTSD, or post-traumatic stress syndrome, and she was able to get help, some therapy, move forward, and gain understanding. Her experience that triggered the freezing up of her feelings was physical. But other experiences can also trigger a freezing up of feelings. Maybe you or someone you know was bullied in school or the neighborhood or even at work. It could be that the traumatic loss of a loved one, or the loss of a job, or the loss of, your home through financial catastrophe, or many, many things that can haunt a person even after they are over. and yet they're over. This is the time when the advice to know thyself becomes so important. A personal example for me is that my father died after he and my mother had been married 3 years. I don't remember him. And he was barely spoken of as I grew up. I think it was just too painful for all the adults in my life. Then, years later, my mother remarried a really nice man, but he also died 3 years later while I had been away at summer camp. And actually, even though I was older, not much was really said about it. Roll the time forward to many years later, I got married. And now I've been married happily many years. But there was this tiny, frozen feeling of fear that I suffered from until the first 3 years had passed. And actually, it was unconscious until one time when my husband was away for a few days, and I recognized, because I was so overcome with worry about him, I called up a close friend and talked to her about it. And just talking it over, recognize it, helped me immeasurably, helped me see that my fear was not based on what was going on actually, but on something far in the past. And you could say that as I talked about it with my friend, that frozen feeling loosened up. It became more fluid, and I could work around it, so to speak. I could sleep more soundly. And what were her magic words? It's okay. Your feelings are normal, but you'll be okay. You'll be okay. It's okay today. Seeing with a single eye, what we call the unclouded eye, seeing in the now, what's happening in the now, is seeing the truth about what is really happening. And when you're grounded in this clear view, through a multitude of ways, we can do this through meditation, through talking it over, through having a friend, through prayer, through therapy, through reading. But getting grounded in the now, in what's actually going on, is very freeing. When you're able to let go of the emotional baggage of past experiences, whether it's about things that were perceived as dangerous, or whether it's about things that really did cause you harm, and begin to see yourself as being here now, as being the perfect child of spirit, your frozen emotions can begin to unfreeze. You can begin to feel free, to have a fluidity of thoughts. You can begin to actually express yourself and understand yourself, your preferences, your hopes and dreams, and you can look around and see the world in a new way, a creative way, an unfrozen way, and you can make decisions. You can pick and choose what you want. It's your life, and your thoughts are setting into motion your experiences constantly. It's your thoughts that are creating new tendencies in your life. So choose those tendencies. So next time someone says to you, what would you like to do? Stop and think and speak your truth. Know yourself. Share your ideas. Share your ideals and let your heart fill with the joy and the good which you so richly deserve. If you've been a parent or any type of caregiver or caretaker, if you've been an employee or worked on a team, if you've had a house plant, you know what it is to nourish and help someone or something flourish, right? It's a heartwarming experience to see someone or something flourish under your care. Well, what about when you take care of yourself? Do you feel selfish? Can you let it become a heartwarming experience for you? That's the thing to do. After all, you are God's perfect child. You deserve wonderful care. You're special, you're wonderful, and spirit is flowing into the universe through you, for you, and as you. This is the truth. Pick and choose. It's your time, here and now, and let good unfold. In closing today, I thought I'd like to read a short meditation by Mrs. Daisy Baum, who wrote a book called Individual Responsibility back in 1918. So this appealed to me because in 1918, she was going through something similar to what we're going through now, the great pandemic and a world grappling with war and confusion. And yet, as a student of divine science, she wrote this as her suggested meditation for us. So I invite you to just close your eyes and listen. I am the image of God. My body is the temple of God. My body is pure, holy, and harmonious. Life is spiritual, not material. Life acts freely through me. I have no fear since divine love is caring for me. Sickness is unreal. Health is real. All of my decisions are for truth. My thought is now harmonious. I shut out all that is unlike good. I retain only the good and true. I am the image of God. And with those words, I just want you to know that we love you. We look forward to reopening in person, probably at the end of June. And until then, please feel free to contact us with your prayer requests, with anything you'd like to say, and have a wonderful week. Peace, love, harmony, and all blessings to you.